Hi everybody, in this video we're going to talk about the Samurai Situational Awareness Project. So the first thing you're going to do is if you're in the My Projects page on CHOP's RedCap, you're going to scroll down and find this Samurai Situational Awareness. And I'll just give you a brief kind of overview of this section of the project. So essentially we want to know if the Samurai bundle, the watcher system, the automated warning tool eWatcher, and the safety huddles, if all of this is helping to improve the shared situational awareness for patients in your ICU. And so what we would like everyone to do is once your site has begun the intervention phase, about once a week or so, we'd like you to choose 4 to 6 patients that are in roughly the same general vicinity of the PICU, and ideally choose a section that has at least one watcher in it that you know of. If you don't know who the watchers are, you can just ask the charge nurse who they are, and then you can pick the section that includes that watcher. If there are no watchers in the unit on the day you chose to do this, that's fine too. But just if there are watchers, we would like you to choose the section that has at least one, if not more, of those watchers. And so for each of the 4 to 6 patients that you're surveying for, you or another member of your team, for us it was a CRC, it could be a research nurse, a physician, whoever, go down to the unit and survey in person 3 providers for each of those patients. We would like surveys for the bedside nurse, the respiratory therapist, and then either the resident or nurse practitioner, whoever is, first call caring for that patient. And so let's say you chose to interview for 4 patients. Then by the end of the time that you've done all these surveys, you should have 12 surveys entered into RedCap for that day, because it would be 4 patients times 3 providers per patient, you get 12. So let's look at exactly how these surveys are going to work. So once you're in the project, you're going to go to this survey distribution tools page. Once you're here, there are a lot of different ways you can actually conduct the survey. You could, copy this link and put it in an email. You could just use this button to send it as an email. You could go in here and you can find there's a QR code that you can have either yourself scan or the person you're surveying scan. Or, what I think personally is the fastest, easiest way to do it is if you have a device, a mobile device, a phone, a laptop, an iPad or something that can access RedCap directly, like I am right now, go into it, log in, get to this page, then the easiest way to do this is to just use that device and open up Public Survey, and it's going to take you right here. Now, if you do choose to do it the way where you send them the link or have them scan the QR code, we just ask that even if you do that, you still do this in person. Please don't just send them the link and then walk away waiting for them to answer it on their own time, especially this main chunk of the survey that comes after this consent page. We really need you to go through these questions with them. And we also found that if you send the surveys to people and ask them to do it whenever they have a chance, more often than not, it just doesn't get done. And then we can't use the information, any of the other surveys for that patient. So we really need you to do this with them. Please don't just send it and then walk away. But for demonstration's sake, we're saying I did it the easy way. I just went in on a mobile device and I clicked and got here. First, it takes me to this consent page. So I or the person I'm interviewing is going to select which site consent I need. I know there's only 3 of them listed right now. I promise you by the time your site is up and active, your site's consent will be listed here. This is just what we have right now. But once you're in here, you're going to select, I'm going to say I'm from South Carolina today. It's going to pop up the site consent. You want to verify that it is in fact your site's consent. It has your site name, your PI's name, it might have a logo or whatever. Just make sure it's your site's consent. We're going to have the person scroll through and read this consent. They do not need to sign it anywhere. If they did sign it, that would be the only source of identifying info for the whole project. So instead, they just need to read it and then answer this yes or no consent question. Do you consent to participation as outlined above? If they click no and then hit submit, it's going to automatically end the survey right there. If they click yes and then click submit, it's going to take you to the main section of this survey. And these are the questions that we would like you to ask them in person. And so first is the date and time question. You can fill it out manually if you want, but the easiest way is just to click now. Site location, I think we said I'm from South Carolina. What is your patient's room number? I know this doesn't seem super important, but it's actually really, really important because we're going to use the date the site name and the patient's room number to link up the 3 provider surveys for that patient so we can evaluate and assess the level of agreement between the 3 of them. And so we really need this room number. I'll just make one up. What is the role of the person you're interviewing? Like I said before, it should be, we would like the bedside nurse, the resident or nurse practitioner, whoever's caring for this patient, and then the respiratory therapist. You really shouldn't have to use this other box. It really should be one of these top 3. We put it on here in case something funky happens and you absolutely have to use other, but it really should be the nurse, the resident, NP, or RT. So we're going to say I am interviewing the resident. Also, like I said before, if you're doing, for example, 4 patients, then there should be 12 surveys. But that doesn't necessarily mean that the 12 surveys are going to be from 12 different providers, because the patients you're surveying about are all in, the same section of the PICU. It's very possible, if not likely, that the same resident or RT, occasionally a nurse, but it's usually a resident or RT, might be caring for more than one, if not all of the patients you're asking about. If that's the case, they do still need to fill out one of these surveys for each patient you're surveying for, but since they've already read the consent, they can just scroll through that and click yes or no. What we have found helpful in these cases where it's one person caring for multiple of these patients is to try and catch them when they have, a 3 to 4 minute block. That way you can knock out all of the surveys in one go instead of having to go back to them 4 to 6 times, one for each patient. So we're going to say for right now, though, that I'm just interviewing the one resident. First, we want you to ask them, is your patient a watcher? If they say no, then they're going to answer this question next, and that's the end of the survey. If they say yes, my patient is a watcher, then it's going to pop up some watcher-specific questions. So first is this patient a newly identified watcher within the last 12 hours? Sometimes we have patients that are watchers for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, so we want to know if it's a relatively new watcher. So we're going to say today that yes, this patient that the resident is talking about is a new watcher. It was within the last 12 hours. Next, we want to know, why is this patient a watcher? So these are some of the more common things that we expected. So the patient's on ECMO, or, their risk of needing ECMO, and they have been predetermined to be an ECMO candidate. Maybe they are at risk of needing a high-risk intubation. Maybe they've had a deterioration event before since they've been here. Maybe they're an E-watcher. This provider intuition checkbox, this is for those patients where the attending's like, I don't know what it is about this patient, I can't put my finger on it, but I really think this patient might have a cardiac arrest while they're here. That would go in this provider intuition box. And then there's this other box. If you have a criteria that is not listed here, feel free to enter it here. It does not need to be really long. It could just be like, they're a watcher for, pneumothorax or a hypotensive crisis or something. So let's say that the resident tells me this patient is at risk of needing a high-risk intubation and they are at risk for hypotensive crisis. Now we want to know, is there a mitigation or contingency plan? If they say no, or then they'll just go on to this question and move on. If they say yes, however, it's going to ask them what that plan is to give a very brief description of the plan. Another thing that we found came up a lot was, especially for residents who just came on, they just started their shift, a lot of times they might say, yes, I saw that there is a plan on the door because I saw the sign on the door. However, I haven't had time to read the plan, so I don't actually know what the plan is. I just know that there is one. If that's the case, they'll just select this, yes, but I do not know the plan, and it's not going to ask them what the plan is. But we're going to say yes. This resident says, yes, there is a plan, and yes, I know what it is. We need very short descriptions of the mitigation plan here. We do not need a novel. What did we say for this patient? Risk of high-risk intubation and hypotensive crisis. So you can just say, if, patient desats below some, threshold number, call ENT to intubate the intubation meds at bedside. And then we also said risk for hypotensive crisis. Again, it can be short. Just say, if MAPS below, again, some threshold, titrate norepi first, then add vasopressin. So it doesn't need to be super long. It's just, as short as you can make it while still being accurate. And then we want to know, and this is going to be a question for everybody, this is not a watcher specific question. We want to know if there are any watchers in the nearby rooms. If they say no or unknown, then that's it. That's the end of the survey. If they say yes, it's just going to ask them what room they believe the other watcher is in. So what we said, 451. Okay, so let's say that this resident says 454 is also a watcher. Then you would click submit. Now, if the role here is listed as resident NP or RT, then when you click submit down at the bottom, it is going to take them, that'll be the end of the survey, they're done. Same goes if the role here is selected as nurse and they say, no, my patient is not a watcher. Again, then it will take them back to the REDCap page, the survey's done. If, however, you say the role is a nurse and they say, yes, my patient is a watcher, then when you click submit down here, it is going to take you to a second additional survey. And again, this is if and only if the role is selected as nurse for bedside nurse and they say, yes, my patient is a watcher. Those are the only criteria that would pop up this second survey. And what this is, it's called the NASA TLX. It is a tool created by NASA to assess the subjective workload imposed by a task or, system. And for the purposes of this project, it's going to ask about the task. For the purposes of this project, task is the discussion of their patient as a watcher and the comprehension of the mitigation plan. And so what it wants to know is how demanding this task was, in regards to different types of demand. So mentally demanding, was it physically demanding? Time-wise, was it temporally demanding? We also want to know, for performance, how successful do you believe you were in accomplishing this task? How much effort do you think it took? How frustrated did you feel any of these, negative emotions while you were completing it? And so each response is going to be recorded using this sliding scale from very low to very high. And each one, when you click on it or slide it, you'll see this number over here. That's just how they're numerically encoded so that we can analyze it later. But you'll just, if you ask them the question before, then you'll just flip the screen around for them to do this part on their own. They can slide it like this, or, once you've clicked on it once to activate the little number bar, you can also just click in various places, wherever they think it should go. But again, it's going to put the little number down here. So once they've answered all of these, hopefully they say it's not too demanding. But everybody's a little bit different. Once you've done all these, then when you click submit, it is going to take you to this thank you. That's the end of the survey thing. You'll click close survey and it'll take you back to whatever page you were on before. If you would like to check that the survey did go through, then you can click on this record status dashboard and you can see, okay, yep, this one is new. It was not there before. And yes, there are 3 bubbles. That means 3 bubbles means it was a nurse who said, yes, my patient is a watcher, and therefore they had to do the NASA TLX. If it's just 1, then that means no, this person said, no, I do not consent, and so it never went to the situational awareness tool. And then you see this one here where it has 2 bubbles. That just means, it was a resident or an RT or a nurse who said, no, my patient is not a watcher, therefore they would not have gotten to the NASA TLX. And then lastly, just a couple tips that we found helpful when we were completing this project here in Cincinnati is first, you don't necessarily have to get the surveys completed in patient order. And by that, I mean, don't try to get, nurse, RT, and resident for patient 1, nurse, RT, resident for patient 2, nurse, RT, resident for patient 3, and so on and so forth. Instead, just do the surveys in the order that you can find the people you need. So if that order happens to be, patient 1's nurse, and then the next one is patient 4's RT, and then the next one is patient 3's nurse, then that's the order it's in. It's totally fine, and it's going to go much faster if you just do it in the order you find people. And remember, like I said, when we do the back-end analysis, we can use the site name, date, and patient's room number to link up the 3 providers for each patient. That way, it doesn't matter what order the survey comes into REDCap as, we will have a way to link them up. So don't worry about doing them in patient order. And then second tip is it might be easiest to find a time of day or even times of day that is best for your unit in terms of everybody being available to survey. So for example, we here in Cincinnati, we had decent luck in the later morning because it was after rounds and huddle, but before people started to leave to go on their lunch breaks. And then we also had a little bit less luck, but still some in the mid to late afternoon because most people had already come back from lunch and a lot of the morning OR case admissions had already come in and been set up and settled down, so it's a lot easier to find people to survey. And then the last tip is, if you're doing this and let's say you need 12 surveys because there's 4 patients and you've gotten 10 of the 12 surveys, but the last 1 or 2 people you just haven't been able to get a hold of, they're tied up in a room somewhere or they're doing a procedure or something, it is okay to leave the unit for a little bit, go work on something else, and then come back an hour or 2 later. We would just prefer that the same providers or the providers for the same patient are not separated by like large chunks of time, like 8 hours or something, because then you run the risk of the patient's watcher status or mitigation plan having changed, and then you have 2 providers for the same patient that have different answers, but both are very correct. And so then it's really hard to assess the sharedness of that situational awareness if they're both correct with different answers. So those are just a few tips to keep in mind. And then as always, if you have any questions, feel free to check the FAQ, the frequently asked questions sheet for an answer to questions that are asked by potentially lots of sites, or if it's not on the FAQ sheet, as always, please feel free to email the Samurai Study inbox at samuraipicu@cchmc.org. And so that's the end of the Situational Awareness Project. Thank you, guys.